as the best time of her life because Srila Prabhupada came there so often. After a period of 6 years, she and her family returned to Melbourne, Sydney, Australia. And for the sake of her children, she moved to New Govardhan Farm in 1982, where she taught in the Gurukul for 15 years. Presently, she is serving the deities, running the Women's Mentorship Program, and is actively engaged in the Vaishnav Care Program. Today's topic is very interesting, making our hearts a fit place for Krishna to reside. Quite interesting. Some of the aspects covered is how do we assist others in distress, the topic of forgiveness, and nurturing ourselves and others. Without further ado, I hand over to Ambika Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyanana Shalakaya Chakshuvamilitam Yena Tasmaya Shri Gurave Namah. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Simate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Picharani Nirvasi Sunyavadi Bhastacharani Tacharani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasati Gaur Bhaktivinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Vyavacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnavis. I offer you my respectful obeisances, and I'm asking you in advance to forgive me for a myriad of shortcomings. And I apologize for any offenses or mistakes I may make. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My main concern is that maybe it's not going to be relevant for everybody, so I'm just hoping that there's something of relevance for everybody. So the first slide is coming, I hope. So, Krishna, as we know, is our best friend and he's the Lord of our lives. Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, and is right within us. So our Bhakti Yoga goal is to love Krishna with our hearts and souls. In order for him to manifest within us, we need to create a fit residence for him. Now, you could ask why we are saying that Krishna... why we are saying that we have to make our hearts fit for Krishna to reside when he already resides there. He's in everybody's heart and he always has been. But the idea is that we want to ask Krishna to manifest within our hearts because though he's been with us since time immemorial, we don't see him actively, there in our hearts until our hearts are fit so that Krishna will manifest there. So that's the idea, to create a pure heart. And that's this whole process of Bhakti Yoga, helping us to create a pure heart. So, so we want to foster those qualities in our hearts that will attract Krishna to come. So how do we foster those qualities that he seeks in his devotees? So, So Srila Prabhupada does describe women already as soft-hearted. So we kind of have an advantage over many of our male counterparts in that regard. But the qualities that a soft heart will exude are love, compassion, generosity of spirit, and kindness. So the topics that I chose today, there's so many topics that we could choose to talk about when making our hearts fit. But I just focused on these 4 because they kind of cover those 4 aspects. So the first topic is assisting others in distress. So if we're assisting others in distress, this is fostering the kindness and compassion for others that's required in a soft heart. Then forgiveness. If we are able to actually forgive people who've wronged us and keep our hearts very clean and open in that way, then that is fostering generosity of spirit, because it's not an easy thing to do. Then if we nurture ourselves and others, that's fostering kindness. And the fourth one is that purity is the force, because without purity, how will Krishna come? Even Matthew 5:8 declares that blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is assisting others in distress. I've got some quotes here from Chaitanya Shikshamrita by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is just the instructions of Lord Chaitanya from Chaitanya Charitamrita. He talks about various of those instructions and makes them very practical. So he states that a person is a devotee to the extent that Jivadoy and Harinam are present within his heart. He also states that it's not necessary to labor for other qualities than those two. So when we think about Jivadoya, it's such a broad spectrum, because you can't have compassion for all jivas unless you have some humility, unless you have some kindness, and unless you're able to exude some love. So it is a very broad topic. And of course, Harinam Ruchi, I did speak a little bit last time about chanting with connection to Krishna, doing our japa with a feeling of connection, a feeling of longing to come to that day when we've got some love there, and in a mood of prayer where we're praying to Krishna to please help us to focus on his holy names. So today we'll just go on with that. With this assisting others in distress for now. So one should develop an attitude of service towards all living beings. This is in Srimad Bhagavatam 11th Canto, Chapter 3, Text 29. One should especially try to help those in the human form of life, and among them, especially those who accept the principles of religious behavior. So this is developing attitude of service towards all living beings. Well, that's a big ask, but then it's refining it. So of course, we know that the devotees are very godly, so that attitude of trying to assist the devotees in distress is going to be very beneficial in softening our hearts and imbibing compassion there. Another quote is also from Chaitanya Shikshamrita. People should try to relieve others' distress as if it were their own. They must attempt to relieve distress by putting aside self-interest, which may obstruct giving assistance. They should try to remove other people's bodily, mental, social, and spiritual difficulties. So just showing, this is the book here, translated by Bhanu Swami. It's really beautiful. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, is ever compassionate on other souls. So this compassionate quality was displayed really nicely by Sanatana Goswami and by his brother Rupa Goswami. They're the first two Goswamis that went to, of the 6 Goswamis that went to Vrindavan, and they had this attitude of great compassion and friendship and love for all the Brijbasis. And they were always very kind and loving with their dealings. They'd even sort out family problems, adjudicate family quarrels, and always they gave so much affection to the Brijbasis. And actually, when Sanatana Goswami left his body, all the men of Vrindavan shaved their heads, and to this very day, they shaved their heads on the disappearance day of Sanatana Goswami. Many men was a devotee staying there who told me this year that so many people were still shaving their heads on the disappearance day of Sanatana Goswami. One shaves one's head on the death of a family member. So in this case, Sanatana Goswami was so close to the Brijbasis that they felt like he was like a family member. So that shows the influence of kindness and loving compassion from a devotee. So there's a nice example of Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur. The devotees would take prasadam on banana leaves, and then they would throw the banana leaves. And then it so happened that they noticed that the local Bengali people were coming to try to take the remnants from the plates of the devotees. So Srila Prabhupada was immediately very compassionate, and he said, how will they chant if they are hungry? We must feed them. So that's how Food for Life started, from that compassion of Srila Prabhupada seeing these Bengali people hungry. So that kind of gives us the idea that, some distress, if someone is in a lot of distress, it'll be very difficult for them to chant. That's what Prabhupada said. How will they chant? How will they remember Krishna if they're hungry? So that's why it's so important for us to be kind of aware of the distress of others, because in doing that, if we can assist others when they are in distress, then that will help them to be able to take up their spiritual life fully, or better, in a better way. So there's actually really a lot of examples. You've probably heard the devotees' memories, the Prabhupada disciples speaking their memories, and there are just so many examples there. Really, it'd be a great book for somebody to collate all those examples of Srila Prabhupada manifesting his kindness and compassion and trying to alleviate the devotees' distress. So I just had a few examples. The first one was Jadharani. This is in 1968. The devotees were really sad because Srila Prabhupada was leaving Boston and going to Montreal. He was flying there. So they came with him to the airport, and even in the airport, some of the devotees were crying. So somehow or another, they sort of followed Srila Prabhupada as far as they could, and then somehow Govinda and Jadharani managed to follow Srila Prabhupada right through the passageway, and there was no stewardess at the door. They followed Srila Prabhupada right onto the plane, and Srila Prabhupada took his seat, and Jadharani and Govinda Dasi were standing there in the aisle beside him. So at the time, Jadharani started to cry because she was just dreading missing Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada, I'll just read this. When I began to cry, he smiled at me affectionately. Leaning forward in his seat, he rubbed his right hand all over my face. And then he wrote a letter to her, and he wrote this: I am simply remembering your face when you were crying in the plane. Please, don't be agitated in any way. Please remain fixed up in Krishna consciousness, and you will always be happy. Krishna is always with you, as he is with everyone. But everyone in Krishna consciousness can know Krishna is with him. Others do not know. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the super soul everywhere. Krishna is so kind that he is always with us as our friend. If we can learn to treat him with our friendly love and affection, the reciprocation is permanent, and that is the highest success of life. So that was his, it's just an amazing thing to think of Srila Prabhupada, drying her tears and being, wanting to mitigate her distress. And then Jamuna in Bombay. When she was 6, Srila Prabhupada came in and said, why are you in this room with no light, no window, no fresh air? And he had her moved to a suitable place where she could have fresh air and it would be more healthy for her. Because these early devotees are so fortunate because they've got such wonderful this kindness in so many ways from Srila Prabhupada. Then there's a devotee called Chintamani, and she came to Bombay in maybe 75, and she was very distressed because her husband had taken sannyas. That was Sudam Maharaj. So she was feeling very bereft and not really knowing what to do, and she was morose. So she went to see Srila Prabhupada, and she had such a long time with him. It must have been like 20 minutes she was there. And Srila Prabhupada was so kind and so compassionate to her. And he actually had some Lord Jagannath deities there somehow. And he gave them to her. And he told her, you can make Lord Jagannath your husband, Lord Balaram, your son, Subhadra, your daughter. And he said, you make a fit place in your heart for Krishna to reside. So he was very concerned always for his disciples, female and male. There's another story of another god sister who came also maybe 75 or 6 to Bombay. And she had suffered mental illness all her life. And it was quite severe. In India, the way that you're dealt with is, you're just taken to a hospital and electric shocks. So it was very harsh, the treatment. And that actually, even in Bombay, when she came, that actually happened. She had to have electric shock. She had electric shocks. So she went to see Srila Prabhupada. And the beauty of this devotee is she was always remembering Krishna. It was really nice. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada, again, he was so compassionate. We had been asked, please find us some service. So simple service, so she would just cut fruit or something. But Srila Prabhupada said, you don't do any service other than I want you to chant 64 rounds. And because she had that capacity, she was so Krishna conscious. So she chanted 64 rounds and she became well. But it was just beautiful to see how compassionate Srila Prabhupada was. And then other just little things. One god sister was sitting, this was Atri, she was sitting with the sun coming in her eyes and she was sort of squinting, and Srila Prabhupada said, no, you come here, and asked her to come up, close to him to be out of the sun. And then Krishna Rupa told me she tried to get into a full darshan one day, and Srila Prabhupada indicated she should go all the way around to the other door, and then she could fit in the other door. So just little things he was observant. There was a devotee in New Vrindavan sitting there just in a t-shirt in the middle of winter. And Srila Prabhupada asked her, are you cold? And then he told the temple president, you've got to look after these women. So that was his mood, that the devotees should be, if they had any distress, they should be taken care of. And then there was one with Guru Das, I'm just remembering from his memories, where Srila Prabhupada personally bandaged his cut foot. Not only that, he asked him every day, how is your foot? So that's the Acharya who we're following. That's a person who always wants to relieve others' distress. So our Krishna consciousness movement is always, our goal is to remove others' distress by spreading Krishna consciousness, giving out books, preaching, giving out prasadam. But sometimes we really have to be very personal with devotees. And especially when people are kind of experiencing, sometimes you could just get a barrage of difficulties. So at that time, sometimes your devotional services are going to take a back seat because you're just trying to cope. So it's kind of, the material world's a harsh place, and we're all going to be put in situations, or we have been put in situations where life's really tough. And just the personal sort of touch of somebody who is showing that they care, and as trying to assist us in times of need. It's so valuable. You never forget it. I will never forget myself in 1976 when I was really suffering a lot of distress and went to Vrindavan, and my dear god sister Vishalini, she so saved me. She saved me, she nurtured me, she looked after me. I am forever grateful. I'm so grateful to her. When I see her, I'll often say, you were so kind to me, when I needed kindness. So, yeah, it's a really important thing. So mindfulness, that's the thing. A devotee may not cry out, I'm distressed, I'm not coping. So, it's up to us all to sort of be mindful if we see or we find out that a devotee is suffering, and then to go to them and to offer an empathetic ear, and to give them friendliness and kindness at that time. I'm just thinking also, it's kind of the onus is on us to look around and see who's suffering. It's not like a full-time job that but in our everyday dealings with devotees, to see how they're going, and to offer any help that we can, any assistance that we can. So sometimes it feels like it's a little bit uncomfortable because you're approaching someone you may not know very well. But actually, generally, if we approach with love for that soul to soul, what can I do for you in a loving way? It's surprising how people will reciprocate. Not always, but generally, if you're approaching in that loving mood, it'll be nicely reciprocated. Okay, so, yes, there was an example that Krishna Rupa told me once, that she approached somebody and she said, are you okay? And they said, yeah, sure, everything good. And then she just looked in their eyes and said, but are you really okay? And out came the tears. Out came the tears. And, Krishna Rupa could be an empathetic ear. So yeah, it's really important to be empathetic, and just to be able to listen well. We recently had a course on listening skills. It was quite interesting because one of the aspects that we covered was speaking, having one person speak and the other person just listen. And there was a time on it, 5 minutes. So you just allowed the other person to speak for 5 minutes and you didn't say a thing. So they could just let out everything. And it was really like you wanted to say something, but you didn't say anything. And at the end, after 5 minutes, you really kind of got an understanding of, fully what they wanted to say. But generally when we are listening empathetically, it's a glance, it's an empathetic look in the eyes. It might be, just a nod of the head or just a question that may assist them in explaining what they're trying to explain. It's just, us taking a back seat with our needs and focusing on that person and their needs. So, and also we need to make time. If we're going to assist someone, you can't go up there with a full schedule and say, Hare Krishna, can I help you out? And then the devotee sits down to talk to you and you say, gotta go, address the deities. So we have to have clear, time clear for the devotees. So, we can bear that in mind. When we want to help someone, we have to clear our schedule so that we've got the time to do that. So at New Govardhana, we have this treasure house in one devotee called Ashesha Sarani. She's been nominated by the GBC as to help the devotees, to speak to the devotees, counselling, and she's fantastic because she's so confidential. She never even divulges who she's seeing. You wouldn't know who she sees, but I know she's so helpful for the devotees who have problems. And also we started this program. So the program is we called it All Good ? And we have on the notice board now a list of people devotees who have counselling skills and their phone numbers. So we did want to make it more formal so that we'd have, keep notes and, have it like formally counselling. But we've just sort of simplified it, and those phone numbers are on the temple notice board and available for everybody. So I could suggest that you set that up wherever you are. There'll be devotees within your community who are either counsellors or psychologists or whatever. And one thing also is those devotees who are listed, they may feel like, I can't help this person. This person should go to a professional, someone else, and they should have a list of, we have in Australia what's called Beyond Blue, which is for depression, or suicide hotline or whatever. They should have all the numbers there so that they can help devotees. So that's just a suggestion for as many temples as you can. It's really important. Mental health, as you know, in this century is supposed to be like the main health problem. Okay, so that's assisting others. So the next one is forgiveness. To forgive or not to forgive. So the definition of forgiveness is to release anger or resentment from the heart, which was there due to injustice or pain from another. So it doesn't necessarily indicate reconciliation. If you forgive someone, it does not mean that the other person has to say, yeah, okay, well, thanks for forgiving me, or whatever, and I'm sorry. Or that's not the requirement, because forgiveness is an act of your heart. It's great. It's great if they do. If the other person does reciprocate, of course, all the better. But that's not the goal. So, because forgiveness is something that takes place in our inner hearts. So, when a grievous injury is inflicted by somebody, it sort of goes to your inner heart and is very painful. And of course, in this age, there's all sorts of abuse that goes on, and it's terrible to think that so many people have to suffer. But somehow or another, forgiveness comes from a place of mercy and compassion, and is a healing thing. Okay, so there are methods for forgiveness. If we could go to the slide for the topics for forgiveness, please. Thank you. So the first one is, don't speak ill of those who wrong us. So one of the benefits of Kali Yuga is that you can think ill of someone and not get a reaction. But you can't speak ill of someone and not get a reaction. You do get the reaction. So it's really important not to speak ill of anybody, anytime, but in this case, it's somebody who's wronged us. So you'd think you'd be able to talk badly about that person because they caused you pain, but actually it doesn't help the situation at all. Anytime we talk badly about somebody, actually we build a bridge to that person. It's a subtle sort of bridge. But we don't want to have a bridge with somebody who's hurt us, so why would we do that? And the other reason is, when we speak ill of somebody, our consciousness goes down. It's kind of like a law of material nature. If you try to lift people up, then your consciousness goes up. And if you put people down, down goes your consciousness. So that's the first thing. Don't speak badly about that person. And then the second one is to show those close to us that we care about them. So that helps us to become compassionate, more compassionate in general. So the people that we live with, there's all sorts of things that we can do that show them that we care for them. And we can go the extra mile for our loved ones. So that's important, because it's just creating that little bit of compassion in our own hearts. Even if you, when you're out, you smile at a stranger. You know, when you think about it, we're all suffering in the material world. It's a horrible place. But you see a stranger and you give them a smile. They may not smile back, but I tell you what, they often do. It's like this connection. They feel this connection. You looked at them in the eyes and smiled at them. They'll often smile back. It's a nice thing to do. So all these things are helping us to kind of come to that stage of Jiva Doya, which is compassion for all living entities. Not an easy task, but these things help us. The third one is to examine the pain that we feel when we are wronged. So for this, we have to go outside our box, because in our paradigm, there's pain there when we think about what's happened to us. But if we can remove ourselves and just sort of examine that pain and think about it a little bit dispassionately, and then we can start to think, well, this person who inflicted the pain, what kind of reason, what kind of childhood did they have, or what kind of abuse or mistrust was sort of inflicted on them? There can be so many kinds of abuse that they then feel that they can cause pain to us. So it encourages us to feel some empathy for that person. And the next one is to examine the pain we feel when we are wronged, and examine any positive effects that we may have felt from that pain. And that's a funny thing to say, but actually, when you ask the question, has this trauma made me more resilient? Has this trauma caused me to be more dependent on Krishna? Has this trauma made me more determined in my life and in my service? So there are attributes that come, but it's a question of really looking at it and thinking that something good has come from something bad. So we do need to be very patient with ourselves if we're trying to recover from trauma, rather than harsh on ourselves. We need to be gentle on ourselves. It's kind of like the place to start, is to be gentle on ourselves. And then that way it'll be easier to forgive others. Okay, so the next one is, where possible, to take association of serious and supportive devotees. Okay, they can help us. If we can speak with people that we know are empathetic listeners, that we feel will empathize with our situation, that's the best thing to do, to be able to let our hearts out. And also take association of those who are more elevated, serious devotees. And the example that I always think of is when we were with Srila Prabhupada, just going back to Bombay, there was a little bit of sort of this thing with the management and the construction team. So there was, I don't know why it went on, I can't even remember, but there was a bit of conflict, So you'd go into Prabhupada's darshans, and then immediately you even sort of stepped into Srila Prabhupada's room, you would feel this sense of, because of Srila Prabhupada's elevation, you'd suddenly just feel like completely beyond all that stuff, and you look around at these devotees that you were mad with 5 minutes ago, and you think, I love these devotees. I mean, it was such a profound experience. And, Prabhupada came to Bombay many times, so many times we had this experience when we'd be in that room with him, having an informal darshan, and you just feel like, I love them. Even though you know that maybe tomorrow you'll go out and you'll be cross with this one or that. So that's because of the elevation of Srila Prabhupada, who's completely on the spiritual platform. So if we take association with senior devotees, it helps us to come up. So it is important to do that. So the last point is that unless we're able to forgive, then we're going to carry that painful connection with that person to our next life. And if there's one person we don't want to carry that painful connection with to our next life, it's that person. So unless we can free ourselves from feeling unhappy and wronged and pained by that person, because we've got that in our hearts, any catches we've got in our hearts are going to go on. And we don't want to do this sort of dance of hate or resentment or whatever it is with this person next life. And in fact, the fact of the matter is, it could be that person anyway, we inflicted suffering in the last life, and they've inflicted back on us. So we want to break that cycle. We want to be able to forgive so that we can have a clean and pure heart. And that will, if we've got some malice there towards somebody or bad feelings, how will Krishna come, and manifest himself there? So somehow or another, we've got to make this a practice of trying to forgive and just letting things, dropping that ball of resentment or hate or whatever it is, so that it's gone. I don't know if I probably haven't got time to tell that story, so I'm going to go on here, and I don't want to miss things. So, next one is, what's my paper here? Okay. So the next one is nurturing ourselves and others. So this topic revolves around burnout. When we take on too much, we need to have a peaceful heart. So we can't be overcome because we've got too much service. So for ourselves and for others, we need to be nurturing. So sometimes our tank reaches empty because we're just sort of, busy. Women are notorious for taking on too much service or not being able to say no, So we want our hearts to be peaceful for Krishna. So we have to find ways to nurture ourselves. So there are various aspects, of course, of our body. We've got our physical, social, mental, and of course our spiritual life. So if we can't manage all our obligations and commitments, we need to pull back a little bit and examine what we can change, to what adjustments we can make to be able to cope. So as far as physical goes, we all know we've got to get out, we've got to do exercise and keep our body fit. Then we have to have a good diet. We eat Krishna prasadam, but if we're going to eat pakoras all day long, we're going to be pretty passionate. So you are what you eat. So we keep ourselves, our nutrition should be, we should be mindful of our nutrition. It's really important. And social. We have to have time to meet up with our friends. Now, women, the way women actually work through things is to talk about things. So if you've got when you've got get together with friends, it's very nurturing to just sit down and discuss, what's going on, your challenges, and somehow or another, just by talking with your friends, they sort of become lighter. It's something that women have that way of resolving things. So, and as far as our mental health goes, a peaceful mind is our best friend in spiritual life. The mind can be our enemy or friend, but to have a peaceful mind is so important for our devotional hearts. So we each have different ways to nurture ourselves. Maybe we like to have a massage, have time out from responsibilities. We might like to sit down quietly with a Krishna book, we might relax in a bath, we might like to go out in nature. We all have our different ways to just de-stress. But it is important when signs of stress start to come that we take a bit of an active part in following up on these things. You know, too easy to put them aside and just be busy. But, you know, then you become, you know, you start to feel stressed and stretched. We don't want that in our heart, or Krishna's not going to come into a stressed and stretched heart. And also we won't be able to have the capacity to help others. You know, we need to feel replenished ourselves so that we can help others. That's really important. So regarding nurturing others, once again, we have to keep a watchful eye out. Yes, the first one is to keep a watchful eye out for people who are in distress, but also keep a watchful eye out for devotees who are kind of, you know, overdoing things and, you know, showing some signs of stress. So one thing we can do is to show them some TLC, some tender loving care, is to acknowledge them. It is so nice to hear when someone comes up and says, oh, you were just performing that arati with so much devotion, or oh, you made these flower garlands are beautiful that you make for Krishna. I'm sure Krishna really appreciates them. Or we might say, thank you for the kirtan. I could feel your connection as you were chanting. So many things that we can say to acknowledge people, just in passing, or when we, you know, just come in contact with people, just to sort of keep our radar out, because any time that we acknowledge others, that is time well spent, and it will be appreciated. It will be appreciated by Krishna too. So the qualities of women, in the qualities of women in the Bhagavad Gita, 10:34, speech is mentioned. Krishna is that thing. That's the opulence of the Absolute, when Krishna is describing all his opulences. So when he's talking about women, it's called this fame, fortune, etc., but speech. So how can we represent this speech, you know, that Krishna is Krishna is the speech of women, if we're using that speech as a way to encourage others. So anything, also we can actually ask people if there's anything we can do to lessen their burden if they're overdoing it. You know, maybe we can suggest a get together with other Vaishnavis. We can arrange a nature work together. We can pay for a massage for them. We can take their children out for the afternoon. There's lots of things that you can do, sort of practical things, if you think about it, just to help someone who's kind of overdoing it and overstretched. So I wanted to talk a little bit about women's circles. I know that a lot of you have reading groups, and that's fantastic. And I just think how happy Srila Prabhupada must be to know that the women around the world are discussing, reading his books and discussing and relishing together. That's so nice. So as far as women's circles go, we used to do this a lot in the old days when some of us lived a little bit far away from the temple. The way we would do it, of course, I know virtually things are virtual right now, but the way we would do it is, well, we'd meet together and we'd have a theme, sort of. So maybe the theme was appreciation. So we would say, as we go around the circle, and we'd say some nice qualities that we'd appreciate about everybody in the circle, or if it was a big circle, it might be about the person next to us. Then we might also do, because we'd start off with kirtan, and then we'd have our theme. It might be, which of Krishna's qualities do you really appreciate and why? Like you might say gratitude, you know, how can Krishna be grateful? But there it is in the Nectar of Devotion, Krishna is grateful. I mean, that's amazing. Or you might do it, which chapter in the Krishna book do you like? Why is it your favorite? Why does it strike a chord? So there's so many things you can do in this women's circle. And at the end, of course, we'd have prasadam. So was so simple, but it was just really nice and a really lovely way to connect. And it's not so hard, you know, but especially these days, you could do that virtually. You could do all those things except Prasadam. You could do those things virtually. But it's very, I always found myself and everyone else, when they'd leave the room, you know, where we'd, you know, all met, everybody would feel uplifted and they would feel a nice bond. So it's a good thing to do if you can organize that. Women have such a bond together, you know, if you can manage to get communications going like that, it's really sweet. Okay. So, okay, the last one is purity is the force. So, some quotes from Srila Prabhupada are, keep our movement pure, then we're as strong as Krishna. And he said, our only asset is purity. Pavitram param pavam. Our only asset. And then he said, you cannot reach Krishna without being pure because he's the supreme pure. So look, I also want to read a beautiful quote, again from Chaitanya Shikshamrita. It's just a short quote. When a conditioned soul develops an attraction for the rasa that manifests in a particular place in the spiritual world, the Lord manifests in the spiritual portion of the living entity, in their purified heart. Thus, the spiritual world and the heart of the devotee are both transcendental abodes of the Lord. And I just thought that was so wonderful. Of course, we're talking about a soul who's, you know, got that attraction. But it's just really confirming that Krishna's there in the heart, and the heart can be a completely spiritual place equal to the spiritual world. Wow. So purity, Prabhupada always said purity is the force. And that's what we want. We want that pure heart. So in the Nectar of Devotion, it states that in order to keep the purity of Krishna conscious activities, we must be free from material desires and mental speculation. Now, that is no small ask. However, many, many times, Srila Prabhupada uses the word gradually. You know, I started to think, I'm going to write down wherever Prabhupada says gradually. And I was like, sometimes it's in twice in a purport. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's all through the Bhagavatam, through the Bhagavad Gita, gradually. So, you know, that's very encouraging. So don't lose heart. We should never lose heart. We should always feel encouraged, because everything we do for Krishna is gain. Every time we chant Krishna's name, every little bit of service we do, that's moving us forward. So yes, it may be gradual, but that's okay. We're moving in the right direction, and we're moving up towards Krishna. So we shouldn't lose sight of that goal, which is to create a sacred and pure place within our hearts for Krishna to come and reside. So in the Nectar Devotion also, it states that devotional service is dependent on nothing other than the desire for such service. And then it states it requires nothing more than sincerity. However, to be fully sincere, we have to have purity. We have to follow the 4 regulative principles. We have to chant 16 rounds daily, and with connectedness, you know, not that we just chanting here and there. So that feeling of connectedness is so important with whatever we're doing, with our japa, with our service. Sometimes our mind's off, you know, we're making a garland for Krishna and we're like, when's the prasadam coming out, you know? So that while we're doing our service, while we're chanting, it's really important to feel that connection. And that will result in the purity coming gradually, gradually, gradually. So the 3 aspects of the heart are the physical, the emotional, and the third aspect, and most important, is in the innermost heart is the soul, and Krishna is residing with us. And he always has, and he always will do. So our bhakti yoga goal is to reconnect with that very compassionate and loving Lord, who's been accompanying us life after life. He's very kind always. So he puts up with all the nonsense that we go on with until we turn to him and start praying to him and sincerely begging him to manifest. So we need purity to achieve this goal of having Krishna manifest in our hearts. So it behooves us to take our devotional life seriously, and what we're doing, our service, our association, that, you know, we associate nicely with the devotees, we're reminding them of Krishna, we're chanting with as much sincerity as we can muster, with that feeling of connection to Krishna. So all of our vows, we need to take them very seriously, and also to pray and pray and pray and pray. So Srila Prabhupada did say that at the end of life we can go back to Krishna, and that is his assurance. But we have to make sure that what we're doing is done with as pure a heart as we can possibly offer it with. So in conclusion, we belong to Krishna, and Bhakti Yoga is all about developing that love for Krishna. We've ended up embodied, so we're suffering. But this life we've been gifted with the most wonderful thing, and that's the opportunity to connect with Krishna, to break our samsara cycle. So connecting with Krishna, of course, means connecting with eternity, bliss and knowledge. That's what we want. So let's not waste time in this life by harboring negative thoughts in our hearts. Srila Prabhupada said, don't wait for another life. I mean, you know, we can do it. We can keep all that, you know, problems and catches in our hearts if we want to, but that's not going to, unless our hearts are pure, Krishna's not going to manifest there. So we need to let them go, and open up our hearts to let in light and love, because that's what Krishna is all about. Krishna loves us more than we can ever love him. So we want him to manifest there, and we want our heart to be pure so that he can manifest. So, okay, so I wish you all success in this process. I know that so many of you do such beautiful service and with such wonderful consciousness. So I'd like to apologize for my own shortcomings, and and to thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I wonder if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
Hi, Krishna. Thank you so much for so many pearls of wisdom and for giving such practical advice. You know, just looking through the comments on Zoom and on Facebook, everyone is just saying thank you so much for this. Looking for questions. Okay, we got one. Here it says, if we are thinking negatively about someone who has upset us, and although they understand that in Kali Yuga this is okay, the question is, but isn't even thinking about them negatively, isn't this still negative?
Of course. Now, what I was saying was you don't get karma for it. And once you let it out, there's some karma there. But of course, this is the whole process. We want to clean our hearts. We want to purify our hearts. We want to get rid of all negative thoughts. And we want to invite Krishna into a purified heart. So definitely, we don't want all those things to clutter up our hearts. So that's, I mean, of course, our main purifying process is that chanting with all sincerity and focus. That's the cleansing, sort of, everything's cleansing. A devotional service is cleansing. But of course, the holy name, in this age, the holy name is the most important factor for cleaning our hearts. So yeah, we definitely don't want to think any negative thoughts, but if they're there, at least we're not going to suffer karma for them. But if we start to speak about them, we build a bridge out to that other person that we're speaking badly about, and our consciousness is going to go down. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I just enjoyed listening to your talk. Okay, we have one more question coming in. Okay, with her hand raised. So I will ask her to unmute so she can ask you her question. Hi, Krishna, Krishna Priya.
Hare Krishna, please accept my obeisances. Thank you so much for the beautiful class. About what you were saying in the class is totally like a challenge for new devotees like me, that we know that we want to avoid like bad thoughts and like criticize and find faults in the other devotees, because we, just like you say, we copy these bad qualities in ourselves and our consciousness get affected by. But it's so hard in this world which is full of anxiety, pain, injustice, and violence, to remain in this purity and kindness. Like, I don't know how to say, like injustice, like abuse, and for me to bring this unconditional love when I'm not pure devotee. So I know in my intelligence that I have to be like that, but I'm still not there. How can I follow your instruction if unfortunately I'm not at that stage, and I want to be there, but I just it seems like a shadow between what should I done from what I'm actually where I am right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so little steps. You can't expect, like, if the amount of times gradually is used in so many of Prabhupada's books is pretty amazing, because it's a gradual process. But it's a positive process, and everything we're doing, every time we can sort of conquer over our minds. I mean, the problem with negative thoughts is they squash out any positive thoughts, and the good thing about positive thoughts is they squash out the negative thoughts. So it's kind of a practice, you know, to look for the good and to accent the positive. There was some song, accent the positive. I can't even remember what it was, but because when we sort of stay in that mood of kind of criticism or whatever, it always pulls us down, and that is a fact. You know, it's kind of like an immediate thing. But if you start to think good, I just got to remember. I remember one time. This is actually not even really relevant, but it was a teacher course sort of, and the teacher said, "Oh God," she said, "you can find something good about anybody, and even if you can't find anything good, tell the student, 'Oh my gosh, you buttoned your shirt up really well today.'" So you can find positive if you're looking for it. That's the thing. It's kind of like a switch to flick, that to look for the positive, because if we kind of stay, you know, happy with looking at the negative, it's not going to bring us joy, you know. So if we can move that around, and it's a practice, it's something you start doing, you start practicing it. Practice looking for nice qualities in someone, even if they've annoyed you or whatever, or if they've done some offense, or You know, it's a bit of a practice, but it's really worthwhile, because if we want Krishna to manifest, because he's within our hearts, but if we want him to manifest, we have to have a beautiful, open, loving heart. So we may be taking baby steps towards that, but steps we should be taking. You know, we can look and think, how can I find something good in this situation? It's a kind of a mental exercise that we can do. And it's very beneficial, you know.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you. It was super, super important for me to hear your class. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the okay, I think we've got a couple more minutes. Looking for another question. Okay. Wonderful presentation. Can you possibly comment on gratitude and repeated association with those you can't avoid through service, but who constantly put you in negative situations? How can you continue to cultivate gratitude in these conditions?
Okay, all right. Well, you can be grateful that Krishna's put you in a tricky situation. So we kind of have to step up to creating association. So if people are difficult because they, you know, talk about, you know, they criticize or something, the best thing we can do is to sort of move. It's not an easy thing to do, but start practicing moving the conversation to something more positive. You can always bring up, oh, you can't believe what I read today, it was fantastic, or, you know, start a discussion about something that's been really important for you in your spiritual life. It's kind of like a bit of a practice, you know, because sometimes you are situated, you know, and you're having to do service. I suppose the last resort is to put some earphones on and listen to a class while you're doing the service with them. But it's if you can just practice, and it does take practice to sort of move the conversation to a more positive level. And Krishna will help you, you know, if that's your mindset, that you're wanting to move things to a more positive conversation or whatever, then Krishna will help you. You can pray to Krishna for some nice ideas of how you can sort of intersperse the conversation that's going on to move it a little bit. You know, you could come with some quotes that are far out that you're ready to talk about. You know, it's a kind of it's a practice, and it's not easy if your association is not so good, but you know, you're the one that's got to be able to turn it around. If you know it's not so good, this association, then either you turn it around or you just listen to some classes or something. But if you come in with some topics that you're going to speak about, you'd be surprised. Devotees can turn around, you know, even if they're in a difficult mindset, a challenging mindset. If you bring in, you know, you can be the light in the room. You can bring in some light and love, and you'll find that they'll move up a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, looking for more questions. Okay, so there's a lot of questions about negative thoughts and interacting with those that may harbor negative thoughts about you. We've got one more question here. Okay, it's a bit of a long one.
Can I just say something? Can I just say something about they may harbor negative thoughts to you? Well, you know, there's this saying. Anyway, look, it really doesn't matter what people's opinion of you, because guess what? Krishna loves you. Krishna loves you 10 times more than you can love him. You know, and Srila Prabhupada loves all the devotees in this movement. The acharyas are there for you. So it's just small stuff. If you're looking at what, you know, you think that people are criticizing, it's really not important. It's really got very little or nothing, practically nothing to do with you or your spiritual life. You've just got to do your best and not just take all this stuff in. You know, why should you take it in? You know, just put a shield, and it's a Krishna shield. Imagine you've got a Krishna shield around you, and all their vibrations can't get in it. You will be amazed if you have a positive shield, their interactions with you will change. They will start to treat you in a different way because you're putting out this beautiful energy, you know, positive energy. It's very surprising, but it works. Not easy, but it works. Yeah.
Krishna shield. Thank you for that. I will definitely remember that in my life and daily interactions. Okay, this question here, okay, it's in a similar vein, but it's dealing with senior devotees. Senior devotees that are placed in a pedestal and that we idolize, but we see that they exploit others. So how do we deal with such situations?
Okay, well, first of all, you know, that's your concept that they're exploiting. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But really, it's kind of like if you can be kind of like a beacon of light yourself. I think you find that if you relate in a positive way to devotees, so that you find good things about those devotees, then they will move to a better place themselves, you know, because you're seeing the good. It's like, well, it's a difficult thing if you have to work under them and you are being impacted. But really, you know, we have to become a little bit self-sufficient in our hearts. We have the Lord of the universe there. We have our spiritual master there, and somehow or another, if we can just radiate some love and affection and respect, it's surprising. Mostly people feel like that who aren't very secure. Otherwise, why would they have to put that out? So they're insecure. But if you are just respectful and, you know, affectionate and, you know, to them, then that can change them. It's just so interesting that what you put out, it changes what comes back to you. But it's a bit of an art, but it's worthwhile attempting it at least. You start in your mind by offering respect to that person. You offer respect to that person because on this whole planet, how few devotees are there, and this person's a devotee. That's a start. And then they've done lots of service for Krishna. Just try to imbibe this kind of feeling of generosity of spirit. If your heart can feel generous towards them, then their reciprocation to you will change, because they'll sense that feeling of generosity that's there. So it's a practice. It's a practice, you know, gradually, just like bhakti yoga. We gradually want to have our hearts filled with devotion for Krishna. And it sure doesn't happen immediately. But we're practicing. And we're practicing and we're taking positive steps all the time. So it's the same with our association. We can practice to be good association. We can talk about, you know, what we've read. We can come in with some nice quotes and open up the floor for discussion. Yeah, things like that.
Thank you so much for, well, the practical advice and application. It's a process. Thank you for that, because I also find myself forgetting that sometimes. Fortunately, our time is running out, and I am put in the sad position to say that I have to end the session here. But perhaps you can have many more like this. Thank you so much for your time and for such a wonderful presentation. And thank you, dear Vaishnavis, for your questions and for your time. And thank you for being part of this lovely community. We enjoy interacting with you more. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.